Lost my job and apartment during the pandemic. Sister promised to help but ghosted me when I needed her most. Ended up homeless for 3 months. Now she wants to reconcile, but I can't get over how she abandoned me. My sister Emma and I were always close growing up. We're only 3 years apart, and despite the usual sibling rivalry, we generally had each other's backs. Our parents divorced when I was 16 and she was 13, and we kind of became each other's support system through all that chaos. When I moved out for college, she'd visit me all the time. When she went to college, I'd drive the 4 hours to see her whenever she was feeling homesick or stressed. We talked almost every day, shared everything with each other. I genuinely considered her my best friend, not just my sister. After college, I moved to Chicago for work while she stayed in our home state and got a job in marketing. We still talked constantly, visited each other, and I'd always help her out financially when she needed it. Like when her car broke down senior year, I sent her $2,000 no questions asked. When she wanted to move to a nicer apartment but couldn't afford the security deposit, I covered the $1,500. When she got laid off for 2 months in 2019, I helped with her rent and groceries. I never asked for the money back, never made her feel bad about it. That's what family does, right? By early 2020, I was doing pretty well for myself. I had a good job as a software developer at a mid-sized company, making around $75,000, had my own one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, and had managed to save up about $8,000 in my emergency fund. Not rich by any means, but comfortable and stable. Then COVID hit, and everything went to shit. In April 2020, my company had massive layoffs. I got cut along with about 40% of the staff. The severance was pathetic, 2 weeks' pay. I filed for unemployment immediately, but you know how that was going in 2020. The system was completely overwhelmed, and it took them 6 weeks to even process my claim. Meanwhile, I'm burning through my savings trying to keep up with rent, $1,400 per month, utilities, food, and everything else. I wasn't too worried at first. I figured I'd find something new pretty quickly. I'm a decent developer with 5 years of experience. But the job market was absolutely brutal. Companies had hiring freezes, and the few positions that were available had hundreds of applicants. I must have sent out over 200 applications between April and July, and got maybe a dozen interviews, all of which led nowhere. By July, my savings were almost gone, and I was starting to panic. I'd already moved to the cheapest apartment I could find, a studio for $900 per month, sold my car, and was using public transit, cut out all non-essential expenses. I was living on rice, beans, and whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. I'd lost probably 20 pounds because I was basically rationing food. That's when I reached out to Emma. I called her and explained the situation. I was honest about how bad things had gotten, how I was probably going to be evicted within a month if I couldn't find work or get some help. Asked if I could possibly crash on her couch for a few weeks, just until I could get back on my feet. She had a nice 2-bedroom apartment that she shared with her boyfriend Mike, and I figured it wouldn't be too much of an imposition for a short period. Emma seemed really sympathetic on the phone. She said of course I could stay with them, that family helps family, and that she'd talk to Mike about it but was sure he'd be fine with it. She told me not to worry, that we'd figured out together. I literally started crying with relief. I felt like such a burden asking, but she made me feel like it was no big deal. A few days later, she called me back. Her tone was completely different. She said she'd talked to Mike and he wasn't comfortable with me staying there. She said their apartment was too small, that it would be weird having me there, and that Mike was worried about COVID exposure since I'd been taking public transit and going to interviews. I was disappointed, but I understood. I asked if maybe I could just stay for a week while I figured out other options. She said no, Mike was really firm about it. Okay, I thought, maybe she could help me out financially then? Just enough to cover rent for a month or 2 while I kept job hunting. Here's where it gets fucked up. Emma told me she was really tight on money right now and couldn't help financially. This confused me because just a month earlier, she'd been posting on Instagram about a weekend trip to Napa Valley with Mike. But whatever, maybe that was before things got tight for her too. I asked if she knew anyone who might be hiring, or if she could just ask around her network. She said she'd see what she could do, but never followed up. Over the next few weeks, I kept her updated on my situation as it got worse. I got my eviction notice in early August. I was applying to every job I could find, including minimum wage retail and restaurant work, but even those were hard to get because everyone was desperate for work. I was basically begging her to help me brainstorm solutions. Her responses got shorter and less frequent. That sucks. Hope things get better soon. Have you tried? Obvious thing I'd already tried. I'll keep an eye out for opportunities. But no real help, no suggestions, no offers to brainstorm together or even just emotional support. The breaking point came in mid-August. I was literally 5 days away from being evicted, sleeping on an air mattress because I'd sold my furniture, eating one meal a day to make my food last. I was desperate and scared out of my mind. I called Emma and basically broke down on the phone. I told her I was terrified, that I was going to be homeless in less than a week, and I begged her to please just let me sleep on her couch for a few days while I figured out my next move. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "I'm sorry, but Mike and I have talked about this, and we just can't. It's nothing personal, but we need our space and privacy. You'll figure something out, you always do." I asked her if she could at least lend me $500 to get a cheap motel room for a week. She said no, they were saving for a house and couldn't spare it. That was the last real conversation we had for months. I got evicted on August 18th, 2020. I packed everything I could fit into 2 duffel bags and a backpack, stored the rest at a friend's place, and officially became homeless. I spent the first week sleeping in my friend Jake's car. He lived in a tiny studio with 2 roommates and couldn't let me stay, then found a spot under a bridge where a few other homeless people had set up camp. Let me tell you, being homeless is fucking brutal, especially during a pandemic. The shelters were either full or closed due to COVID restrictions. Public bathrooms were mostly closed. Libraries were closed, so I couldn't job search properly. I was trying to keep up appearances for job interviews, which meant finding places to shower, gym day passes when I could afford them, keeping my clothes clean, and trying not to look like I was living on the street. The whole time, Emma was posting on social media like nothing had happened. Pictures of her and Mike cooking elaborate dinners, weekend trips, shopping hauls from Target. In September, she posted about how they decided to get a bigger apartment and were moving to a nice 2-bedroom in October. A fucking 2-bedroom. While I was sleeping under a bridge. I didn't comment on her posts or reach out. What was the point? She'd made her priorities clear. In October, Jake's roommate moved out, and he let me crash on his couch for $200 per month, which I scraped together doing odd jobs I found on Craigslist. In November, I finally landed a temporary contract job doing basic web development that paid just enough to get a studio apartment in a rough part of town. By January 2021, I was somewhat stable again. Still struggling financially, but I had a roof over my head and was slowly rebuilding. That's when Emma reached out. She texted me out of the blue. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. How are things going? Mike and I are settled in our new place now. You should come visit." I stared at that message for probably an hour before responding. I told her things were better now, that I'd found work and housing. She responded with, "That's great. I knew you'd figure it out," with a bunch of heart emojis. Like, what the fuck? She knew I'd figure it out? While I was homeless for 3 months, she kept texting periodically over the next few months, always cheerful and casual, never acknowledging what had happened. In March, she called to tell me she and Mike had gotten engaged. She wanted me to be happy for her, wanted to know if I'd be able to make it to the wedding. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her I was hurt and angry about how she'd abandoned me when I needed help the most. Her response was that she was sorry I felt that way, but that she and Mike had to protect their relationship and their space. She said it wasn't personal and that she'd hoped I'd understand. Not personal? Her own brother being homeless wasn't personal? She got defensive when I pressed her on it, saying that I was being manipulative by bringing up all the times I'd helped her financially. She said those were gifts and that she'd never asked me to keep track. She claimed that letting me stay with them would have been enabling me and that I needed to learn to handle things on my own. I hung up on her. Our parents got involved after that. They said I was being too harsh, that Emma had been in a difficult position, that her boyfriend had a right to not want me in their space. They said I needed to be the bigger person and forgive her because family is forever. But here's what kills me. It wasn't just about the couch or the money. It was about her complete and total abandonment. When I was at my absolute lowest point, facing the most terrifying situation of my life, she turned her back on me. She didn't even try to help me brainstorm other solutions. She didn't offer emotional support. She didn't even maintain regular contact to see how I was doing. Meanwhile, she was living comfortably, posting happy couple photos, planning her future, and couldn't spare a single thought for her brother sleeping under a bridge. The wedding was in June 2021. I didn't go. She was upset, our parents were disappointed, and I was labeled the stubborn one who was holding grudges. Since then, Emma has made periodic attempts to rebuild our relationship. She sent me a Christmas gift in 2021, which I donated without opening. She invited me to her birthday party in 2022. I didn't go. She texted me when I got promoted at work earlier this year, saying how proud she was of me. It all feels hollow and performative. She wants to go back to how things were before, but she's never actually acknowledged the severity of what she did. She's never genuinely apologized. She talks about it like it was just a disagreement we had, not her abandoning me during the worst crisis of my life. I'm doing well now, by the way. I got a permanent job in late 2021 making good money, moved to a nice apartment, rebuilt my savings. I've been in therapy dealing with the trauma of being homeless and the deeper issues around trust and family relationships. I've made new friends, started dating again, and generally rebuilt my life. But I can't get past what Emma did. When I think about her now, I don't see my little sister who used to visit me in college or who I'd help out when she was struggling. I see someone who will abandon you the moment it becomes inconvenient to help. I see someone who will prioritize her own comfort over her family's survival. Last month, Emma texted me saying she was going to be in my city for work and wanted to meet up for dinner. She said she missed me and wanted to work things out. She said it had been over 2 years and it was time to move on. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh, if I should try to rebuild the relationship. She is my sister, and we did have a lot of good years together. Maybe people make mistakes. Maybe she was just young and selfish and has grown since then. But honestly, I don't think I can ever fully trust her again. How do you come back from someone proving that they'll abandon you when you need them most? How do you rebuild a relationship with someone who watched you become homeless and felt no obligation to help? My therapist says I need to decide whether holding on to this anger is serving me or hurting me. She says I can choose to forgive Emma for my own peace of mind without necessarily rebuilding the relationship. But forgiveness feels like letting her off the hook for something unforgivable. I keep thinking about all the times I helped her without hesitation, never keeping score, never making her feel bad about needing help. And then when I needed help for the first and only time in our adult relationship, she couldn't be bothered. Maybe I am holding a grudge. Maybe I am being stubborn. But some betrayals cut so deep that they change the fundamental nature of a relationship forever. I don't think I can ever see Emma as my little sister again. All I see is someone who let me sleep under a bridge because it was inconvenient to help. So Reddit, am I the asshole for not being able to forgive my sister? Should I meet up with her and try to work things out? Or is it okay to write off family members who abandon you when you need them most? Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. I'm trying to read all the comments, but there's so many. Thank you to everyone sharing their own stories and perspectives. Edit 2. A lot of people are asking about Mike's role in this. Yes, I think he influenced her decision, but ultimately Emma is an adult who made her own choices. She could have helped in other ways even if he didn't want me staying there. Edit 3. For those saying I should have had a better emergency fund or should have taken any job available, I was doing freelance work and odd jobs during those months, but it wasn't enough to cover rent in Chicago. The job market in 2020 was unlike anything we'd seen before. Edit 4. Some people are asking why our parents didn't help. They're retired on a fixed income and were dealing with their own financial stress during the pandemic. I didn't feel right asking them to strain their budget when Emma was in a much better position to help.